Unbroken, the podcast with Madeleine Black. Healing through storytelling.
Hello and welcome to Unbroken, the podcast with me, Madeleine Black, where I am interviewing actually amazing people that I have met along my journey. And today's guest, I met quite a few years ago on social media, and I was a guest of hers on her podcast show. So it's nice to really turn the tables and ask the questions today. So Darlene Garcia's husband, Frank, died suddenly in a tragic motorcycle accident in 2015. His death sent her into a spiral of darkness that led to isolation, fear, and so many overwhelming emotions. She desperately sought help from all directions, including faith in God, joining a widow support group, and seeking a psychologist for a couple of months. Nothing or no one could find her the relief from the pain that she needed. She almost lost all hope of finding light and joy again until she was introduced to the Grief Recoveries Institute's website by a friend. Unfortunately, none of the workshops she found were offered in Guam. In her desperation to make sense of the overwhelming feelings of grief that constantly consumed her, she signed up for the first workshop she could schedule and was off to Austin in Texas. After taking the Grief Recovery Method workshop and learning the small correct actions to heal her heart, she finally saw a spark of light and believed in joy and hope again. This was the start of a purposeful journey that she immediately embraced, and 6 months later, she became certified as a grief recovery specialist. Darlene is currently an advanced specialist and delivers the grief recovery method through the online program and the 2-day personal workshops, not just in Guam, but around the globe. She is a global speaker, passionate about giving grief a voice, and a life coach with a focus on self-love, which allows her to continue to help grievers move from their recovery to discovery. So welcome, Darlene. It's so lovely to see you again.
Well, thank you. I'm so honored to be here with you today, Madeleine.
Oh, you're welcome. So the first question I would like to ask you is a question that I start with all of my guests, is what does the word unbroken mean to you?
Ah, gosh, that is such a powerful word. And it can mean so many things, I know, to many people. But for me, unbroken means that I do not allow the circumstances in my life to dictate how I live, right? So not to become a victim of my circumstances, but really to learn from it, to grow, and and to just thrive, no matter what that situation is. And it took me a long time to realize that. And you'll hear about my journey, but even through all of that, I continue to still have to thrive and get through many different adversities in life. And so that word unbroken to me there's power in it, so much power in it. I think when people use it in their life, they will realize that there's so many possibilities, no matter what their circumstances are.
That is a beautiful answer. Thank you so much. Can you tell us a little bit about Frank? What was he like?
Frank was an amazing man. We met when we were just teenagers, and so just growing up and taking the journey of adulthood with him was amazing. Frank was such a curious person, and so he was an avid learner. Like always wanted to know, new things. Was always open to new possibilities. Loved adventure, and he was my biggest fan. Just reflecting back on all the different things that I've done throughout my life as an adult, and Frank was always there, like never judged me, always supported me, always gave me the best advice. When I was feeling down, he always found ways to lift me up, and always just made me feel good about what I was doing and who I was. So that was the kind of person that he was.
He sounded like he was an amazing support.
He definitely was.
And really believed in you. Yeah. And you got married, obviously, and you had 2 daughters, and you were married 24 years. And
Yes, we have two daughters and a son actually.
oh, and
So
a son. Okay, I knew
yes,
you had
our
two daughters because we share. One of our daughters has the same date of birth, which is a bit spooky, isn't it?
I know it was amazing when we found that out. It was like, wow, what are the chances of our daughters being born on the same day and the same year?
Yeah,
So we could have been at the hospital around the same time. Who knows?
yeah, it could have been actually, yes. So you were married for 24 years. You have
24 years.
children, and then
Three
there was
children, yeah.
an accident. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened?
Yes, it was a Friday morning, and Frank was on his way to work, and he was a motorcycle lover. So any chance that he got to ride his motorcycle to work, he would. Of course, it's because of the weather, right? We were living in Guam at the time, and so we get rain a lot. And so any opportunity when it was dry, he would go out and ride his bike. Um, and that morning, he had left, and it was just a few minutes away from our home that he got into a motorcycle accident. And from what I was told, he was avoiding traffic, avoiding hitting someone, what I meant by that. And so he ended up trying to lay his bike down. If you're listening and you ever rode a motorcycle and you're trying to avoid a crash, a lot of times bike riders will try and lay their bike, and so they would slide instead of flying off. But I think because of the speed that he was going, it was just regular speed, but he didn't see the car in front of him early enough, and so had to press on his brakes very suddenly, and was just pressing on it really fast, and that jolted him. So even though he was trying to lay his bike, he still got thrown, and he died from a fractured skull.
And did he die at the scene, or was he taken to hospital and died there?
He was taken to the hospital, and he died on the way into the hospital. Actually, it was pronounced dead on the way.
You weren't able to be with him at the end?
No, not at all.
That's tough. So you're just going along with life, been married for years. I know I've been married for a long time. We take things for granted. And then this bolt out of nowhere must have felt like lightning just struck you. How did you begin to repair or to recover as a mum, a single mum now with 3 kids?
Right. Yeah. It was the scariest thing ever. And, just in a split second, your life being so amazing to it significantly changing. And it was like the power just went out, like it was so much light and then complete darkness. And I just didn't know how to navigate out of that darkness for the first few months after he died. There was so much fear around trying to participate in life. I didn't know how to adult without him. We started our lives together at the age of 17. And so,
17.
Yeah. And, so it was really scary. I was brokenhearted. I was sad. I was angry. But I think that the dominating emotion was fear.
Mm-hmm.
Fear of so many different things. Like, what is life going to look like without Frank? Because that's all I knew.
Mm-hmm. And you must be young as well. How old were you when this happened?
I was 43 when Frank died.
Which we don't really think of women in their early 40s as being widows.
Exactly. We had planned to grow old together, and so when that dream was taken away, that just left me completely hopeless and feeling like I would never be happy again. That being sad and lonely was now my destiny. That's what I believed in those first few months.
And you really struggled to find the help that you needed. You needed help, but you couldn't really find it. Why do you think that was?
I think it's because many people intellectualize grief. So we, as a human race, we come up with many different reasons why we shouldn't feel these uncomfortable human emotions, why we shouldn't feel sad. Don't feel sad because, he's in a better place, or he didn't suffer, or you need to be strong for your kids.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these different things that people told me that didn't actually work for me. In fact, it pushed me away from many people, pushed me away from those that I was the closest to, and it pushed me into isolation. And then, let me just give you an example. The widow support group, I thought that they were going to be my saving grace. They've all suffered their loss is very similar to mine. They understood what I was going through. And the first session that I walked into with these women, I felt like a complete stranger. I felt so alone because they were in a different part of their journey. Most of them have already lost their husband for years and have, some already married again in other relationships, were smiling and laughing. And I couldn't understand how that could even be possible.
You couldn't
I just
connect.
couldn't. And so it was really hard for me to explain to people how I felt because no one got it. No one got it.
It almost sounds like the advice you were given was to avoid feeling, to distract yourself, because people are scared of feeling that maybe it might overwhelm you. But I think you've got every right to be sad and angry. I'm also a psychotherapist, so I would encourage people to, whatever you're feeling, that's how you're feeling.
Right. Yes, exactly. And yeah, so it was either don't feel like that because it's unhealthy, or it's not good. It's not acceptable in society, or don't feel bad or don't feel these ways because it makes me uncomfortable. Like 'cause I don't know what to say to you. When you cry in front of me, it's uncomfortable. And so, I had a lot of people um, that walked away from my life in those first maybe 6 months of trying to figure out my grief.
And it's because of their awkwardness, really, isn't it? They don't know what to do. Nothing to do with you. It's just they don't know what to say.
Yes, exactly. And, no one, it was like walking on eggshells with me because I was this, this human that had nothing but emotions that were spinning out of control. One moment I'm angry, the next minute I'm sad, the next minute I'm far off in space, the next minute I'm laughing profusely, like no one knows why I'm laughing. The next minute, I'm just not feeling. And so no one knew what was triggering. Sometimes I didn't even know what was triggering. And they didn't want to be the cause of those triggers either. And so it was maybe safer for them to just stay away until I figured out how to become me again. Everyone just wanted me to be normal. They wanted me to be normal again. Yeah.
So then somebody suggested that you go along to the Grief Recovery Institute, and that seemed to resonate with you and it changed your journey.
Yes. And interestingly enough, I went to this workshop not because I believed that they would help me to be happy again. I didn't believe that. I didn't never believe that I could ever be happy again. What I wanted was for someone to help me to control the emotions or to take it away. Right?
Yeah, that's common.
Right.
I don't want to feel this anymore. Take it away, please.
Yes, exactly. It was like, it was too much for me to handle. And I'm, before Frank died, I was this person that always had things under control. I had it all together. And so to not have it all together and not be able to control that was very scary for me. And so when I walked into this workshop, it was really for that purpose, was just help me to control it because I'm losing people in my life because they don't know how to deal with my triggers. And I'm scaring my kids and my grandkids because they don't know how to deal with my grief. Hence, they don't know how to deal with their own grief because they're trying to help me with mine. And when I walked into,
that was true? You really think you were scaring your kids and your grandchildren?
They told my mom. They told my mom that they were scared for me because I was isolating. I didn't want to come out of my room. Sometimes I didn't eat for days. Sometimes I didn't even go and shower for days.
Okay, but that's different than scaring them. They were worried for you.
Oh, yes. That's what I meant. They were worried for me. So they were,
But you were showing them what grief looks like. You weren't denying it. You weren't suppressing it. This is what happens when somebody dies. And this is what happens when you go through grief. There is, I think, 7 stages that they say, and you can go through any of them at one time and backwards and forwards all over the place, a range of emotions.
Right. And so one of the things that I learned early on in this workshop that I went through, I talked a little bit about it earlier, was that grief is not intellectual. right? It's
No.
all about the human emotions. You know, it's all about the feelings that you have, and that it was okay to be sad. It was okay to be scared. It was okay to be angry. It's okay to feel all of those things and to not suppress them, right? And so, you know, my isolation was not healthy for me. I will tell you that. Like I did stay in my room for days on end without coming out. It was, you know, when I think back, I think I would scare myself, like wondering, like, what is going on? Like, she's not eating, she's not drinking, she's not even going to the bathroom. Like, what is going on with her? You know, and so, and then they come into my room and I look like a zombie. Like I just have like nothing, you know, just nothing. And so it taught my kids that they needed to be strong for me, and that's also wrong, right? And so I knew this through the grief recovery method, that I needed to show them that acknowledging my human emotions and sharing it with them was important, so that they can also share their human emotions and not feel that they needed to be strong for mom, or that it wasn't right for them to cry. My kids didn't cry, barely. The moment their dad,
It's really once you started to allow it, to
yeah,
allow these feelings.
yeah, because and it's because of what I learned as a child growing up, to be strong and to not show those human emotions, and that tears were signs of weakness.
So you were
And
taught not
so,
to cry.
right, yeah. And so my kids learned that from me, and it was difficult for them to show their human emotions. And so that was a form of suppression, right? Keeping it inside and bottling it up. And so that
But
was,
that must be so hard. Here you are dealing with the grief of losing your husband very tragically and suddenly, and then you've got maybe guilt from, what am I doing to my kids now in this process as well?
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so it was really, and it was hard for me, because now I am the head of my home, where Frank was the head of my home. So I never had to worry about leading our family, making these big decisions in life, because that's what he did,
Yeah.
you know? And so that was part of why I stayed in my room, was if I didn't participate in life, I wouldn't have to worry about making the wrong decisions.
It's a
So
bit
I
like
stayed in my
hiding
room.
your head in the sand, or you're like the
Yeah.
ostrich, huh?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
But it's a change in responsibility.
Yes, and that too, you know. My kids were adults when their dad died, but even at that, you know, your kids are your kids, right? You're always going to be their parent, and so you always want to be able to lead by example. And I didn't feel like I could lead by example after their dad died. I just didn't think that I was worthy of that role, or that I was even skilled enough in that role, because I relied on Frank for all of that.
So what changed then? Because I imagine you then did take on that role.
Yeah, well, you know, sometimes you don't have a choice in these things, right? But the grief recovery method really taught me so many things about my belief system, and about grief and human emotions, that I really feel that I had backwards. And, you know, I mentioned some of those, the be strong and the grieving alone. Like, these are all myths of grief, right? You talked a little bit earlier about the stages of grief. And I actually learned through the method that the stages of grief that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had come up with all those years ago were really more for the dying, right? The
Yes,
terminally
it's true.
ill patients. And so for those of us that are grieving, that have lost someone that already died, the stages of grief actually didn't serve us in our healing journey. And so it was really about learning about the misinformation about grief, all the things that we learned that were wrong, that taught us how to suppress, to numb, to self-medicate, which are all the unhealthy ways of dealing with grief, or maybe not dealing with your human emotions. And so all of that turned that light back on for me. And it gave me the courage to step out and to participate in life. And so, you know, that the acquiring those skills from the method allowed me now to step into my healing journey, which before I just didn't even want to do that, because I didn't believe that healing was even possible. I didn't believe that. And so, you know, it took me a little while to get through and walk through this journey, and, you know, a lot of self-discovery, and not liking myself, and, you know, facing my fears, you know, which is what brought me to the self-love, you know, transformation, and understanding that I relied on my husband for so many things that when it was time for me to rely on me, I didn't know how.
You were lost.
I was so lost.
Yeah.
I felt like a lost soul, Madeleine. It was, and that was probably the scarier thing than losing him. Like his physical absence broke my heart into a million pieces.
Mm-hmm.
But the after, having to go on with life without him, was scarier than not having his physical presence there and focusing on that. It was focusing on who am I? Who am I now that he's gone? Who's going to make me feel loved? Who's going to make me feel worthy? Who's going to be my biggest fan?
Mm-hmm.
Who's going to be there to give me advice when I need it? Who's going to be my, my dartboard when I was frustrated at work? Who was going to help guide me in giving the best advice to our kids? Who's going to love on our grandkids? Because I always felt he was the better grandparent. He was more loving and more playful, and I was the more serious one. And so I just felt very insecure in me because all of that came, I believed, I relied on him for all of that validation in my life.
Yeah, your whole world, as you knew it, was just shaken up completely. And do you think it made a difference because you were such a young widow?
Yes, I do. I do. I believe that, well, you know what? Yes and no.
Okay.
I believe that yes, because I was young and I wasn't prepared to lose him that young and to be alone in life that young.
And yeah, it's the one thing that we all know. The moment we're born, we've got the return ticket in our back pocket.
Exactly.
We know we're going to die, but we just never know when. We take it all so for granted, don't we?
Yes, but I've worked with older widows that have lived an amazing life with their husbands, and their grief is still as deep.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter, right? And so I realized that death, not just death, but loss in general just brings on these feelings of grief that are so unique to each of us. And that's one of the things that I learned and I love about the method is that it taught me how to value people in even a more individualistic way, to honor and respect everybody's journey of life, regardless of where they're at. Doesn't matter what kind of loss they're experiencing, whether it's a loss of a loved one through death, whether it's through trauma. Retirement is a loss that some people take really hard. Empty nesting. I've worked with, parents that are struggling with the empty nesting, and that changed their identity too.
Absolutely.
It's like, I'm no longer this parent that my children can rely on, right? It's like, well, who's gonna rely on me now? Who can I cook for? Who can I wash clothes for? Who can I give advice to? Like, now I don't feel worthy. And I've had parents that have come to me because of those feelings. And so, it's such an amazing thing to be in that space, to be able to serve people in that way. But it also teaches me a lot about, human beings and just about journeys people go through. And I love the stories. They're heartbreaking, but they're also triumphant when they come out on the other side. And I get to have that honor, to help them to get there. And it's a purpose that I never thought I could embark on.
And what I hear from you now is that you went from this very lost and lost of identity kind of place, not knowing your purpose in the world, to someone now that's actually really grounded and have really got this beautiful, open, non-judgmental attitude towards people. And you can see the joy and the love in you now. It's what an amazing journey you have been on. Do you ever get tired of telling your story?
No. In fact, this is why I love to do the work that I do. It's one of the biggest reasons is because I get to tell my story. I get to continue to honor Frank, and his memory stays alive because of sharing Frank with the world, and, I laugh about it sometimes because Frank was like my wingman. He loved to see me in the spotlight and just loved to be that person that was there ready in the crowd, to give me that standing ovation, to give me that hug when I was done, whatever I was doing. And so he never liked to be in the limelight, and I chuckle about it now because I'm thinking, dude, you are more famous now in life. Like, people know Frank Garcia because of the work that I do. And I find it kind of funny, that it's not.
Yeah. It's like his legacy now, isn't it? You've got a living legacy towards your husband and you're keeping his memory alive. Because I know now, I've got a better sense of Frank now. I did know that your husband obviously had passed, but now I've got a better sense of him and who he was and his
Right.
values and what he stood for. And yeah, so I will carry a little piece of Frank in my heart now as well. So yeah, spreading it across the pond wherever we are.
Yeah.
This is
He'd be honored.
Oh, good. So through your own journey, you were so fascinated with this process that you then went on to teach this. And you were working in the corporate world and human resources and other
Yes.
areas. And you discovered that the way people treated grief or loss within the corporate world, they had very little ways of supporting people. So you do a lot of work within companies as well, don't you?
Yes, I do. As a HR professional, before Frank died, I look back on my career and it makes me sad. A lot of regrets on some of the decisions that I made, and I've worked through that healing part of my life as well, because, you don't know what you don't know.
That's it.
And it took me to lose my husband to understand that as corporations, we have it all wrong. It was, let's give her as much time off as she needs to deal with her grief so that when she comes back, she will be the same person and she will be 100% productive.
No.
Never works that way.
No.
It never works that way. The other part to that was, having these set days of, bereavement leave. It's like, who could get through their grief in 3 days or 5 days? Like, and I was the administrator over that leave. So imagine that. I had no clue that the employees that were coming to me back then, asking for more time. And I'm like trying to work with them with other leave programs, but not really being open to the idea that they just need more time to grieve. And it was a lot of because they didn't feel safe coming back to work, knowing that they would still be grieving or that people were going to judge them.
And I guess everybody's different, really, aren't they?
Right.
I can think of my dad died actually 22 years ago yesterday, and I'm thinking of a friend who went back to work in 3-4 weeks, and she was absolutely fine. It really helped her. And I went back after 4 weeks, and they said, you need to go, and I then returned 10 weeks later. So everybody's going to be so different, really, aren't they?
Yes, you're right. Some people want to come back to work because they don't want to be alone. Some people thrive in, just keeping themselves focused on other things because, maybe the grief is a little bit too overwhelming to deal with, in such a magnitude or consistently. So they need to do it in spurts, right? And yes, you're right. Everybody's different. But one of the things that I realized was that the more impactful way to be there for your employees and to be compassionate and to help them to feel safe is to understand that grief exists in the workplace. It does. And it's not just about someone coming back from the loss of a loved one. People are grieving positions that they didn't get, that they maybe applied for. People are grieving, maybe their boss leaving and now they've got a new boss. Or coworkers are retiring. People are grieving policy changes. The company has just changed and now we've got a new CEO. And so we've got all these different policies in place. Change, has always been a difficult one in the corporate world, but we've never looked at change as being grief, that it could be bringing on feelings of grief. And so, working with corporations now helps me to bring that light back into the HR perspective and into the leadership, space to show them that when you're more compassionate with your employees, when you can provide a safe space for them, no matter where they're at in their life, when you recognize that you cannot leave your problems at home, you know what I mean? Leave your problems at the door. Don't bring it to work. We're one person. We're human beings that feel. And if something is bothering us at home, a child that we're worried about, how can you not worry about it while you're at work? How can you just shut that off? We're not robots that can just turn off human emotions. And so to be a more compassionate leadership really drives productivity and motivation and loyalty. The loyalty that comes out on the other side when you can just hold space for your employees and acknowledge that they're still grieving and be supportive while they navigate through their grief and come to work, because they can coexist. But employers don't know how to show employees that it's okay to allow it into the workplace. They teach them, even if it's unspoken words, it's still that belief that I can't grieve at work. It's not appropriate. I need to focus on work.
Put on a mask and pretend.
Put on a mask. Yes, exactly.
It sounds like you're really bringing the heart back into business.
Yes, that is exactly it.
Yes, beautiful. And then hopefully the CEO will mirror what you're saying. So if he's able to show some heart and some understanding for their own journey, his or her journey, then that will trickle down to all the workforce.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. And the dynamics of how people feel and how they move forward at work, it changes significantly, and it's amazing to watch that transformation
Absolutely,
happen.
because it's really breaking down barriers, isn't it? All that resistance and all those walls that we build up, it's breaking them down. It's fantastic work. I'm just wondering if anyone's listening right now that is struggling with grief or loss of any kind, as you describe it. Do you have any tips for them? What helped you to get through where you are to now?
It's understanding that grief is normal and natural, and that human emotions, should be felt and acknowledged, and just be okay with that. Be okay with showing it, that there's strength and vulnerability. So you don't have to act like you're tough to be strong. Sometimes it's more courageous to really just share how you really feel, and then find someone that is safe, that you can trust, that you can lean on, that they could be, I like to call it a heart with ears, right? Where you
heart with ears.
Heart with ears.
I like that.
Yeah, where they just listen, they don't judge, they don't try and give you advice. One of the things that I learned is that grieving people are not looking to be fixed. Sometimes they just want to be heard.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just need you to hold space for them. And so if you can find that person, and I think everyone has someone in their life that can be that heart with ears, then just let them know and be transparent about what you need from them. My family, when I came back from this workshop, the very first one that I took, and told them exactly what I need from them, it was like this huge weight lifted off of their shoulders, because they wanted to help me and they didn't know how. And as soon as I said, this is how you can help me, it was like, finally, we can help her. They were honored to help me. They wanted to help me. And so being able to tell your family, your heart with ears, the person that you trust, what they could do for you, know that it's an honor for them to be able to do that for you, right? Because people just don't know.
I just love that expression, heart with ears. I have pictures of little hearts with ears all flying around the place. It's beautiful. What a lovely place to end our interview today. So Darlene, it's just been so lovely to see you again, and thank you so much for coming on my show.
Oh, you are so welcome. It was such an honor. And, I just want to say that the work that you're doing, to just bring, so many different people together on this platform, to not only share their stories, but to get their voice heard, because that voice can help someone else that maybe doesn't have a voice just yet.
Your voice is so important, because sadly, loss is going to affect so many people, especially right now. There's so many different types of losses. So your voice is so important. So I am delighted that I can give you a platform to air your message. So go out there and look for your hearts with ears, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you, Darlene.
Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeleine Black, playing now on all the main platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher for Android, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and here. Play Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeleine Black.